I don't game very often, but sometimes certain games catch my eye. Over the past 2 years, the games that have caught my attention, or autistic hyperfixation, are Slay the Princess and the Coffin of Andy and Leyley. These two games have found themselves among my personal favorite narrative-based games. They're up there with Telltale's The Walking Dead series in terms of substance, writing, and an overall immersive experience. Now, why do I bring up these two games in particular, instead of making separate videos on each? Simply, I thought it would be a fun idea to have a compare and contrast of these two games, as I have found it somewhat difficult to quantify where I rate them in my own personal list of favorite games. I want to have these games duke it out, but also I want to explore what makes these games special and unique in their own way. That's pretty much the whole premise, so let's just begin. The contenders will be rated by the following parameters: writing, character design, general art, music, message or moral of the game, and game mechanics. Each category will be rated from 0 to 5. When it comes to the writing of this game, I think it can be attributed to a couple of key factors. 1. The dynamic between Andrew and Ashley. 2. The dark humor. And 3. Still being able to pry into the very twisted, dark, and outright atrocious reality of the toxicity between the siblings, despite the seemingly cartoonish jester vibes that take place throughout the game. The writing is seamless in keeping this contrasting dynamic. It keeps the experience fresh. It keeps you on your toes when playing. As you journey with the twisted clowns, you are taken on a roller coaster of shock, drama, laughs, and most of all, tragedy. Though the humor may seem lowbrow to some, I find it endearing, as it fits the absurdity that happens to these malicious misfits. If I could draw a parallel to another form of media, I'd say the humor of this game is akin to something you find in South Park or Family Guy. Maybe you can throw in some edgy anime or something for the, well, I guess
obvious reasons.
Overall, I say the writing of this game is one of its stronger characteristics, if not the core reason I think it's such a good game. For this score, I will be giving it a 5 out of 5. I'm not even sure where to begin with this game. For starters, the sheer amount of options and dialogue you can explore in this game is insane. If you aren't skipping through anything, and it's your first playthrough, you truly don't grasp the full scope of it. In fact, you'll likely have to play it 3 times to see every possible route, with the Pristine Blade update that is. Moving on to the characters, you'll find each character or voice captivating in their own way, as they're all very distinct. They're very archetypal. This is a side note, but I have another video analyzing the voices in this game and their psychological significance. If you want to check that out, I will leave a link in the description. What I think Slay the Princess differs from the Coffin of Andy and Leyley here is, the writing in Slay the Princess is far more poetic, dense, and captivating, like reading a classic piece of literature. You'll commonly find the narrator playing out the scene, and that's where you can truly appreciate the nuance and details that make the moment more expressive than it otherwise would be, with more, let's say, bland writing found in your common visual novel. The dynamic between the characters can be charming, sometimes overwhelming, but it adds a layer of entropy that the game as a whole somewhat tries to encapsulate. It can also be quite humorous. Definitely not as overtly as the Coffin of Andy and Leyley, but it has a good dry humor. It has some English charm, so to speak. I did not say that very well. Oh my god. If the Coffin of Andy and Leyley is like South Park, then Slay the Princess is like the Stanley Parable. English charm. Jesus Christ. Arguably one of the biggest draws of this game. Even if you haven't played this game, you most likely have seen the characters and profile pictures, memes, fan accounts, or
other forms of content.
I would argue that the character design is the biggest reason the game got as much attention as it did in the first place. It was the hook that reeled you into the strange, controversial, and psychologically compelling narrative, or detracted you if you didn't like the taboo nature of the game. Their visual appeal transcended the game itself, turning Andy and Leyley into internet icons whose faces carried the game's reputation long before most people ever even touched it. The only complaint I may have is the contrast between the sprites and the avatars while in-game. It's nothing crazy, but it could have a bit more complexity, perhaps. Again, not something I feel super strongly about, it's just somewhat of a nitpick. For this score, they will be getting a 4 out of 5. Throughout most of the game, you only get a chance to see the character design of the princess, with remnants of the player during mirror sequences. Still, despite the lack of characters, there is an immense diversity in how the princess is depicted. This ties in beautifully with the overall narrative of the game regarding perspectives. It truly cannot be understated how versatile this one character is. You can feel the full range of emotions depending on which version of her you are seeing, depending on what iteration you are on. You may feel sympathy, fear, anger, joy, awe, cattiness, regret, pain, fury, and love. Even the baseline princess has a couple temperamental differences depending on the actions the player takes. What makes this even more remarkable is how her design and performance evolve in perfect sync with the player's perception. Subtle shifts in tone, expression, posture, and voice acting completely redefine her identity each time, making her feel like a new person while still unmistakably her. The baseline princess herself can appear gentle or menacing depending on your choices, creating a feedback loop between your actions and her embodiment. For this score, they'll be getting a 5 out of 5. For this criterion, I'd say it's safe to say that the Coffin of Andy and Leyley is sort of meh, or just okay. It's passable. Although the color palettes, textures, and styles seemingly match the overall aesthetic of the game, it comes off as bland and doesn't leave a lasting impression. The one environment that I found somewhat interesting was the Demon Realm, but that was less about the environment and more about the sound design / music. I don't have many harsh things to say in this department because this is not where the focal point of the game is. It's within the writing, characters, and narrative. I think if anything, this goes to show that substance can take you a long way, even if it isn't as visually appealing as your multi-million-dollar AAA franchise game. That is only concerning the environments. When it comes to the cutscene art, so to speak, it is very well done. A lot of the art leaves an imprint on your mind and has a charm that puts it into the screenshotable category for me. So environments are meh, but the cutscene art is peak. For this score, they will be getting a 3 out of 5. Just like much of the other facets of this game, the art is woven beautifully to reflect the overarching perspective narrative of the game. It is tied seamlessly to the player's actions. Regardless of any route you take, the art and environment will signify what has changed. It will hint at how you and the princess have transformed, and it will match it perfectly. When set up on a new trajectory, it will be reflected in the voices, in the environment, in the player, and finally, in the princess. This versatility keeps it interesting throughout the playthrough, as you'll constantly be asking, what awaits me? Why does everything look this way? And how did my actions lead to this? The craftsmanship of the story aside, the art is gorgeous. The details and narration of each environment further illustrate the dense care that was put into each iteration of the story. On your first run, you're only left with clues on what awaits you. Everything hints at the cost of your actions and leads up to the final confrontation, only for you to repeat the process once again. Behind the character design, I'd say the OST for this game is top notch in being complementary to the atmosphere the game aims for. It adds emotional depth to the already astounding writing. It just perfectly encapsulates and cohesively showcases the subconscious emotions you feel as you play along. It demonstrates the absurdity, cruelty, trauma, and tragedy of the Twisted Clowns.
Nice titties. Mind if I,
There is a childlike but dark atmosphere as you listen that leaves you feeling the weight of the dialogue, storytelling, and dynamic between the siblings. Each track really captures the essence of each scene. What stands out most is how fluidly the score shifts, almost like a shonen anime, moving between heavy, lighthearted, and surreal moods without breaking immersion. Despite its simplicity, the soundtrack's restraint is its strength. It supports rather than overshadows the story. You could argue that its minimalist approach mirrors the characters themselves. Playful on the surface, yet harboring something deeply disturbed underneath. Also, as a side note, the music is perfect for sampling, something a producer like me appreciates a lot. Most of all, I'd say that the OST is really good at emphasizing the duality and themes of the game. Tracks like Jealous Doll are childish but also tragic and dark. It represents the deeply pathological, the deeply possessive attachment that Ashley has to Andy. While tracks like Wandering Wizard showcase nostalgia, they do so with something slightly off, like the foundation of a corrupted innocence. This corrupted innocence is the overall feeling I get whenever I listen to this soundtrack. And I believe that it is the true theme of the game. It is the overarching narrative of this game.
So you gave my album a 7, and that shit made you cry, motherfucker?
In comparison to the Coffin of Andy and Leyley, the Slay the Princess OST is the polar opposite in terms of style and complexity. From the starting track, the main theme, you are mesmerized with a very somber but beautiful piano arrangement. This track is the foundation for a lot of other tracks, but they all take contrasting turns. They transform, distort, shift, and evolve in different ways, but maintain the core melody. You can tell right away that there is a certain emotional weight, that the tracks are dense with story. Every facet of this game showcases a rare duality, constant transformation within perfect cohesion. The music, like the story, shifts forms while remaining unmistakably itself. Truly, almost every aspect of this game has this versatility, but oneness that compounds upon itself, woven together very deliberately. The main theme, the princess, and the shifting mound tracks are the epitome of this diversification, but also have the same core. Each track is a puddle, a piece that clues into an ocean of depth. The narrative brilliance of this cannot be understated, and that's not even mentioning the graceful composition of the music itself.
Can't really say much else about it. Kind of feeling strong 9, 2 of 10 on this LP. Not just this year, but in your entire lifetime.
Due to the game being incomplete, there isn't a full retrospective I can delve into for this game, but we can still explore some of the fundamental concepts surrounding it. The main focus, the driving force of the Coffin of Andy and Leyley. The Coffin of Andy and Leyley seems to really focus on the dynamic between Ashley and Andrew. They drive the narrative forward with every action, dialogue, and progression they take together. But this is not all. The overall dynamic is a character study into codependence and how childhood trauma molds who you are. Although the Twisted Clowns may be mischievous, cynical, or just outright evil, there is a tragedy underneath it all. As the story progresses, you get more and more insight into the siblings' past and how their present pathologies came to be. From Ashley's unwavering possessiveness to Andrew's perverse shadow that was slowly built through shame and by the responsibilities placed on him by his neglectful mother. A lot of the controversy in this game comes from the deeply disturbed and twisted thoughts of traumatized siblings, But that is why this game is a perfect psychological horror. The horror is in the very archetypal psychology you can find in the real world. Codependency, repression, violence, shame, self-hatred, and a loop that keeps Ashley and Andrew tethered. A loop that keeps them in a downward spiral into madness. We have not reached the final destination for these two, but nonetheless, the game will forever be enticing for its apt and dense study into two crazily self-destructive individuals. The message or moral of Slay the Princess? It's complicated. One can say it's multiple stories or narratives within narratives. It's overwhelmingly a meta story, but also a love story. I've actually touched on this meta-ness in a previous video. Outside the love, there's a deep, postmodern, or deconstructive motif found within Slay the Princess. It's deeply philosophical. Its fundamental question is, how does perspective shape a story? All of the routes are consequences of the perspectives you decide to take. On a first run-through, your routes can almost feel like a personality test. If the first princess you meet is the nightmare, you are fearful. If you meet the damsel, you are in love, or at least attracted to her, so on and so forth. Every choice taken, action refused, and choice only serves to change the player's perspective. And with every new route, you have a new voice that showcases how your perspective has changed. It emphasizes what you were likely feeling, even if only subconsciously. But forecasting this aspect of the game is a love story between two godlike, infinite beings. So, strangely enough, the game is meta, but also very traditional. It's an existential kind of love. The synergy of yin and yang, the multitude of the princess and the nothingness of the long quiet, and how they can coexist. This game is so dense in this regard that it feels like it's in a league of its own. The perfect intertwining of postmodern questioning and traditional romanticism is unrivaled. Despite all the tragic, existential, painful, sorrowful, horror-filled aspects of this game, or whatever other perspective you may take, Slay the Princess is a beautiful modern love story. The mechanics are more traditional, almost old school. There's tight navigation, grounded puzzles, and physical item interactions. That said, the gameplay itself is definitely underwhelming if you're looking at it purely as game mechanics. It's simple, almost too simple at times, but that's not where the game's magic is. The emotional weight, the narrative pacing, the characters spiraling together, the atmosphere that's constantly chewing at your nerves, that's where the real magic happens. So any complaint about limited or basic gameplay ends up being more of a nitpick. The game knows exactly what it's prioritizing, and the mechanics just exist to keep you trapped in that emotional pressure cooker with Andy and Leyley. At its core, Slay the Princess is built around branching dialogue and choice tension. The mechanics aren't about stats or combat systems, but about how your decisions reshape the narrative on the fly. Every choice feels loaded because the game constantly reframes your reality. Even something as tiny as a hesitation, an extra question, or a failed attempt at being brave can reroute you into a completely different version of the princess or the narrator. The mechanics lean into an illusion more than action. You're not playing in the traditional sense. You're steering tone, trust, and identity. The game rewards curiosity, and punishment almost feels psychological. You don't get a game over screen, you get a new universe that reflects the kind of person you just chose to be. The biggest thing you could critique here is variety. The core loop is intentionally simple, but it can start to feel like you're circling the same structure. Walk in, choose, react, get reborn into a new timeline. It's not egregious at all, and the game's writing absolutely carries it, but a few more unique mechanical wrinkles or environmental interactions would have been a nice bonus. Still, The internal party system of the narrator, voice of the hero, and all the other voices keeps things fresh enough. Instead of stats, you have perspectives arguing in your head, and those voices shape which versions of the story you tumble into. It's more about losing control gracefully and watching how the narrative mutates around you.
No, I don't really feel like it.
What can be said about these modern horror games? They're both exemplars in similar ways, but also juxtaposed in their own unique ways. These indie games are a testament to the power of excellent writing. They showcase how a good narrative foundation will always take precedence over flashy animations and overcomplicated gaming mechanics. I would argue that these two games are some of the best horror games in recent memory. The Coffin of Andy and Leyley is full of disturbed charm, but has a potent, deep psychological underbelly. Slay the Princess, much like its overarching theme, has a multitude of meanings, emotions, and thought-provoking concepts flowing from it. And yet, it's still a story of love. Now, which of these two games edges out the victory for this video? This has been a question for me as soon as I completed these two games, and why I decided to make this video in the first place, because it felt like a truly difficult question. I adore both of these games for different reasons, but ultimately for the same reason: beautiful writing. With all that said, I believe that Slay the Princess comes out on top for me, personally. Every aspect of Slay the Princess has precise care, purpose, and thought put into it, and it's evident from the detailed artwork, beautiful voice acting, and the careful detail put into the narrative. The same could be said for the Coffin of Andy and Leyley in many ways, but for me, Slay the Princess just has that it factor, by a slim margin, but nonetheless, a margin good enough for the conclusion of this video. Who knows though, the Coffin of Andy and Leyley is still ongoing, so perhaps I'll make a part 2 if the time comes. But as of now, Slay the Princess is the victor for this horror battle royale.